July 2026. In the middle of the night, federal agents walk up to the front doors of American journalists. When these reporters open their doors, they aren't greeted with a standard inquiry. They are handed subpoenas targeting the New York Times, carrying a blunt ultimatum: give up your anonymous sources immediately, or go to jail for contempt of court. The orders for these raids aren't coming from standard channels at the Department of Justice. They are being directed by FBI Director Kash Patel, and he is running the entire investigation directly out of the White House. For 50 years, a strict firewall has existed between the Oval Office and the FBI. Since Watergate, the Bureau has maintained independence from presidential politics to prevent exactly this kind of domestic targeting. Now, that firewall is gone, which leaves us with a critical question. What exactly is leaking out of this administration that is so damaging they are willing to tear down half a century of democratic safeguards to stop it? To understand the crackdown, we have to look inside the West Wing. By the summer of 2026, the administration has become deeply paranoid. Internal communications, policy drafts, and highly sensitive schedules are bleeding into the public view almost daily. The breaking point arrives when the press gets hold of a particularly embarrassing secret. The president had privately accepted a $400 million luxury gift from the Qatari royal family. The gift is a massive Boeing 747-8. It sounds impressive, but the jet is completely unequipped with standard defense systems. The vulnerability is so severe that during a trip to Turkey, the Secret Service has to launch an emergency intervention just to keep the aircraft safe. The raid on the Times serves as a tool for political damage control. The administration is prioritizing the concealment of a humiliating personal scandal over genuine national security. So how does an FBI director launch an off-the-books strike against the press without the entire system throwing red flags and shutting him down? The answer lies across town at the Justice Department. Here, Emil Bove, recently elevated to acting Deputy Attorney General, is already executing a sweeping campaign of internal retribution. Bove moves fast. He fires over a dozen federal prosecutors, specifically targeting the lawyers and investigators who handled the January 6th Capitol riot cases. He even demands a comprehensive list of every FBI employee involved in those specific investigations. He has legal cover thanks to Executive Order 14410, creating a new classification labeled Schedule Policy Career. Under this label, traditional accepted service protections vanish. Federal employees who once required a lengthy documented process for dismissal can now be fired immediately, without cause. By systematically clearing out independent career officials, the administration creates a vacuum. They fill these empty desks with ideological loyalists, people who will rubber stamp directives rather than question their legality. This is why Kash Patel faces no internal resistance. The structural watchdogs designed to prevent a rogue FBI director from targeting reporters have already been quietly, legally dismantled by Emil Bove. Patel's leak investigation serves as a case study. It demonstrates that the federal law enforcement apparatus is now functioning as a direct extension of the Oval Office. From purging DOJ attorneys to sending federal agents after journalists, every action serves a single objective: shielding a paranoid administration from the consequences of its own actions, rather than defending the nation. With the civil service gutted, the Justice Department reshaped, and the media actively under threat, the final bureaucratic shackles are gone. The administration is free to operate without oversight. This control now moves beyond the Beltway. Under the direction of DNI Tulsi Gabbard, federal agents have begun raiding election offices in places like Fulton County and Puerto Rico, physically seizing machines used to tally American votes. Silencing the press over a luxury jet provided the necessary proof of concept. The administration has successfully dismantled the legal and public safeguards that once protected the mechanics of the democratic process. The American electoral system relies on a decentralized architecture. Voting is not a federal mandate, but a series of thousands of independent operations managed at the state and county level. That decentralized norm dissolved in the night. Bypassing local sheriffs, federal agents in tactical gear breached the Fulton County election offices. Agents began seizing hard drives and physical voting machines, loading them into unmarked black vans. The operation quickly expanded beyond the mainland, with federal teams landing in Puerto Rico to strip precincts of their local voting infrastructure. This was a physical override of election sovereignty, conducted before a single vote for the 2026 midterms had even been cast. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard oversaw the domestic expansion of these raids. The administration defended the seizures as a national security necessity. They claimed Chinese state actors had compromised voting networks, framing the raids as a preemptive strike to ensure the integrity of the 2026 midterms. Intelligence agencies shifted their focus inward, deploying ACIAC as a domestic security force to monitor and regulate local election workers. This use of foreign intelligence as a pretext for domestic intervention created a significant accountability vacuum. However, that same overreach provided the exact target the institutional resistance needed to begin a counteroffensive. Senator Mark Warner led the legislative response to the raids. Warner's Outlook memo systematically dismantled the White House's hacking claims. The administration's figure of 220 million compromised records actually stemmed from a handful of unverified data points. This intelligence bypassed standard vetting protocols, allowing the administration to militarize the election process using manufactured urgency. Simultaneously, civil society groups launched a legal offensive, filing a wave of lawsuits to block any further federal seizures of voting equipment. Federal judges acted quickly, issuing injunctions and ordering the administration to return the seized machines to their home precincts. By exposing the flawed data and halting the physical seizures, the legislative and judicial branches successfully stalled the administration's initial momentum. The final pushback came from within the intelligence community, as whistleblowers leaked the administration's internal strategy. The leaked documents detailed a project titled Deceive, Disrupt, Deny. The playbook targeted districts hostile to the administration. The goal was to manufacture localized chaos by severing precinct logistics, naturally lowering voter turnout. This manufactured confusion would provide a legal basis to deny the certification of unfavorable midterm results. With the strategy exposed to the public and the courts blocking the physical raids, it appeared the administration was finally cornered. This institutional success proved to be a dangerous illusion. The executive branch realized that if local election boards could no longer be intimidated, they would have to be simply erased. High-stakes meetings within the Oval Office shifted toward a final, terminal maneuver. The combination of legislative audits and court orders successfully blocked the raids, yet this victory left the administration with one path forward, an all-or-nothing escalation. Late on a Friday night, a terrified staffer leaked the text of a final, unreleased executive order. The document was a draft declaration of national emergency, calling for the total suspension of state electoral sovereignty. The order authorized the withholding of billions in federal funds to coerce states into surrendering their election infrastructure to the federal government. This was no longer about influencing the midterms. It was a plan for the total federal hijacking of the American voting system. The institutional pushback intended to protect the system instead forced the administration toward its final, ultimate override. This is a civilian street in an American city. The soldiers walking it are patrolling domestic neighborhoods, a military presence usually reserved for overseas conflicts. The United States is experiencing a collapse of its constitutional order. This total breakdown is happening from the inside, without an external invasion or the use of kinetic force. The event that triggered this shift was the breach of 220 million voter records. That figure accounts for almost every eligible voter in the country. While the public focused on the security failure, the executive branch moved to utilize the breach as an administrative opening. To understand the current crisis, we have to look at how those 220 million compromised records provided the legal basis to remove election control from the individual states. The administration bypassed the legislature and ignored judicial injunctions to consolidate power. Using the 220 million hacked files as a legal foundation, the president declared a national emergency that effectively suspended state authority over elections. The mechanism for this takeover was the Save America Act. It turned the security breach into a tool for financial leverage against state governments. This map shows the billions in federal funding states rely on. To maintain support, governors must hand over local voter rolls to federal oversight. As the freeze took hold, The decentralized map of state-run elections faded, replaced by a centralized federal system. By holding state budgets hostage, the administration secured the surrender of local democratic authority. The focus then moved to the physical hardware used to collect and count the ballots. New operational directives were issued to stall the functions of local election boards across the country. Citing the need to secure compromised data, federal agents moved to physically occupy state election offices. Governors from both parties responded by threatening to deploy the National Guard to prevent federal agents from seizing local ballot boxes. The federal government utilized the security crisis to move against the sovereignty of its own states. The 2026 midterms concluded with a quiet aftermath that felt different from any previous election cycle. The Intelligence and Justice Departments were restructured to serve the executive branch directly, with dissenters removed from their positions. The breakdown of the system suggests that the most significant vulnerability to the republic exists within its own domestic political structure. The laws protecting the American experiment proved to be only as durable as the willingness to uphold them during a crisis. Both sides of this conflict acted on the belief that their actions were necessary to save the country. When a government manages its own elections through its security apparatus, the focus shifts. The question is no longer who counts the votes. The question is whether the votes still count.